Today on Forge20, we're going to make this saw sharpening jig.
3, 4.
It's Thursday. I have a bunch of content coming for you on Sunday, regular episode. It's going to be all about the welding and modifications that we made to the welder and a few other things. But today... So I was actually contacted this week by someone who needs some saw blades sharpened. They're carbides, 12-inch. This is not one of them. This is one of mine. This is a 10-inch, 40-tooth, and I think she's got a couple of 12-inch 60s and a 12-inch 80 that need to be sharpened. And she's been sending them out. It's costing her about $80 a blade, which, if you know anything about saw blades, is about what a new blade costs. So she's looking for someone to sharpen her blades. I'm not really a sharpening service, so instead of just sharpening her saw blades for her, I think what I'm going to try and do, having never met this person, going to meet her tomorrow, is teach her how to sharpen her own blades. You can do this to anything you own. There's no reason to buy new unless the tool or blade is damaged beyond repair. But you can sharpen just about anything. And the biggest thing you might need is a jig. So we're gonna need a little bit more than that for this saw blade, but it's basically a jig. And what we're gonna use is an angle grinder mounted to a board with a sliding table to put the saw blade on. So we can just rotate the saw blade into the grinder. It'll have some angle adjustments. I'm going to try and make it with some drawer slides that I salvaged. So yeah, one-day build. We're going to make a tool to sharpen carbide saw teeth. Okay, so I think we're going to call this the pillow block. For the grinder, it's got 2 holes for cable ties to strap the grinder down. It's got a dado relief. I just did that on the table saw. This hole will allow the M8 bolt to pass into. It's got the handle hole, and that'll be our pivot point so that we can change the angle like that. All right, and then I have these drawer slides. Pretty nice. And I think I'm just going to mount a flat block in between them to put the saw blade on, and then mount that on a flat plate with the pillow block on it, and we're there. Like, the pillow block's probably the most complicated piece, and that was 5 minutes on the table saw to make. All right, so first mock-up. Found a nice plank for the base. Some 1x12 that I cut down to about 10x10 for the center, the slides, the grinder, the pillow block. It's all coming together. Figuring out the sliders and where everything went and what was the best way to do it, because these slides, so they have locks on them. If you go too far forward, it locks this middle slider in out extended position, and then there's another slider inside here, but that slider is really stiff, the one on the inside, I think because I mounted it really tight to the board. It will probably loosen up over time, but I wanted to slide on that middle set of roller bearings, and so I had to figure out exactly where to mount it to give myself the extension that I need, and then I just put in a screw stop to stop it from going forward and engaging these latches. Like, if it goes even 1 centimeter farther forward than this, these will click into place, and you'll have to reach in and get both of them at the same time to get the drawer to slide back again, the table to slide back. So all I've done is limited it to that middle slider, and this one this one will still slide back if you want to go even farther back, but it's very stiff. And then as soon as you get out, if you lock, see, now it's locked, and I have to disengage. I need 2 hands because I need to disengage that one and that one. So just trying to figure out my range of motion, basically. All right, to be honest, it's basically made. There's nothing to it but these 3 pieces, right? So there's a base, there's the slider, which is the rest for the saw blade, and there's the pillow block. And most of this is just figure it out angle kind of stuff. Like you put the block on, you see where the angle grinder blade lines up, you make a few little adjustments to the block until it lines up where you want. I marked a center line here just to give myself an idea. It's not really required that I be on center line, as long as the angle between this blade and the teeth of the circular saw blade is the angle that I'm looking for. It doesn't really matter how I get there. And I can add a lot of features, like stuff to swivel the saw and this and that. But this is what I call an ad hoc project. You build what you need, right? None of my saw blades are very fancy. They don't have compound miters on the teeth. They're just flat teeth, easy to sharpen. So there's no need to get carried away. And even on the big 12-inch ones that the lady has that I need to sharpen tomorrow, they're nothing fancy. They're just a 1-inch arbor with literally the same tooth layout as this one, just more teeth because they're 2-inch bigger diameter. So let's put it all together, basically. You can see that I put screws in, but they just peg in to hold the pillow block in place. And then I have this bolt and these washers, which come in. So I can do this without dropping the whole thing on the floor. The holes there. It's at an angle to match the angle of the hole in the angle grinder head. All right, and let me set you guys up and I'll install it. Right side socket. And all I did with this hole was give myself a little bit of wiggle room so that I could get the bolt through and then adjust the angle grinder to where I want it to sit. Now before I get it all cranked down, I'm going to sit here and check the angle of my blade to the base plate, because basically I've built square, like I'm using the same components measured to the same lines here. This is flat to this, you know, as close as we can get with wood. So if this is perpendicular to this, we're in good shape. And it looks like I'm flat all the way along. Now the trick is not to move the grinder around. While we give it the last few cranks. So it's tight and the nut is just flush with the bottom of the board, so the board sits flat on the table. And now you can see how this is going to work. Here, let me show you guys in close up. So this is actually 2 washers. This washer just tightly fits inside. It's a 5/8 OD, and when you screw down on it with the screw, it tightly fits inside the hole. And this one is a finish washer that matches the pan head. And that way, because this is just a little pressed piece of sheet metal, the inner ring presses down against the inside washer and the outer edge presses down against the saw blade, keeping everything in there. It doesn't have to be tight. just snug enough to keep the saw blade from jumping around. We go all the way to tight, and then back about 1/4 of a turn so that the saw blade turns. And now the location of this hole, I basically just took the blade, lined it up where I wanted it with that profile flat against the blade, and marked the center of the hole and put the screw in. Nothing to it. So honestly, you can make a mountain out of a molehill and make a 30-minute video out of this, but I feel like this is going to take 5 minutes of video time, and it really is literally taken me an hour of shop time to do. It's not even fair to call it a one-day build. I mean, it's taken me all day, honestly, but I goofed off and did a lot of other stuff and had lunch and 16 other things, and I'm still here with this project done in a couple of hours. No problem. It's super easy. It's just visualizing what you need and making the 3 pieces that you need and screwing them together. You can make your adjustments on the fly, and that's it. Here we go. I'll show you how we sharpen the teeth. So that's a good thing to point out. The screw is loosening itself because of the direction that I'm turning the blade. So if I went the other way, which is what I'm going to do now, it would actually tighten itself a little bit as I went around, or stay in the same place instead of getting looser. And as it gets looser, the blade wants to pop up and come out of the hole. So that, you don't want that. You want it to be nice and flat to the angle. So the beauty of this setup is that the angle of the tooth will always be the same everywhere, all the way around. But you have to control the depth, which is like how hard you press the tooth against the grinder blade. So you could cut all the way, you know, as far as you want it to go. But what I do is I just pick a spot by eye on the inside of the tooth, and I grind until I hit that point, and I use that same spot. You can make a tooth stop that, if I added a little piece of wood on the outside right here with a pin, I could then stop the blade wherever I wanted, right, with the pin, and then it would be the same every time. But it's a little more complicated, and you have to add a way to move the pin between every tooth, and I feel like it's not really worth it, especially for a little blade like this, where you're probably only going to get 1 or 2 sharpens out of it anyway. These blades, they just come apart. The teeth chip off. The edges gall. Like, even though you can sharpen them and flatten them, you'll never get these points as sharp as they were from the factory. So you'll extend the life of this blade by sharpening it, but it's not like you'll double its life or anything like that. Because as the teeth start to wear away, they just don't cut as well. And they get hotter because things are rounder. And it's been heated. And it gets heated by grinding. You know, so you have to be super careful not to cut for too long. I can see, as I cut, a little heat line move its way across each tooth as soon as I touch it. And all that affects the temper. So, is it worth doing? On a blade like this, that's $25, I'd say no. I'd say use them until they're not usable anymore and go buy a new one. You'll get way better performance out of a new blade. For one of these $80 or $100 or $140 12-inch blades, maybe it's worth it. I don't know. So you can sharpen them a couple times. I mean, this jig cost me nothing. Even if I had to go buy the angle grinder, it would be $49. You know, if I had to go buy some drawer slides and buy the lumber, I mean, I could put this whole thing together for something like 50 or 60 bucks, which is less than the cost of one of those 12-inch blades. So, you know, your mileage may vary, but certainly this one works for me. It sharpens the blade nice. I can feel it. It's wicked sharp now. And it'll definitely cut for a while. I could go back and touch up some of these that have roundovers on the edge by change the angle and put the outside of the flat against the blade. You know, it's just whatever you need, just whatever you can set up. That's what I love about making shop jigs and shop tools. They don't have to be fancy, but they have to work. All right, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this little short one. Have a good one. See you Sunday.
Forge 20. Da-na-na!